Hey guys, how you going? Today we're going into personal behaviours of set apartness. And it's really important to learn that this isn't just a list of rules and regulations that we tick off and, oh, I don't agree with that one and I do agree with that one. Let me say up front, I agree with every single instruction written here. None of it is null and void. However, when we take it through time and we look at the customs and the cultures and we see that Yahushua breathed life into a lot of these things, the behaviours have transformed. The instructions are still the same. And that's what is so refreshing, going through this with the fresh mind of Yahushua's Ruach within me and within you. Hopefully you can receive it. It's so exciting to see that if we do these behaviours, we will be with Yahushua because he is the living word. That whole portal, doorway, dimensional, archway. Remember the portal archway? I'm going to read another article that was written a couple of days ago about that, and it's phenomenal before we get into the meat of this. Because that portal archway, while it can never be closed once we've received the blood of Yahushua, it's always there, we can always have access. We don't. Because disobedience keeps us out. He says he'll never leave us or forsake us. The portal arch is open. No one can close it unless you blatantly walk away for good. But we don't go in there, do we? Because darkness does not want to approach the light because its deeds will be revealed, its behaviour will be revealed. We might have to give up things we don't want to. We might have to change and we don't want to. We don't want to go into the light. We'd rather be afraid and, timid and, trembling at the bottom of the mountain instead of pleading to go up and experience him. So that archway, portal archway, is so important because without the dimensional connection with Yahushua's dimension, what's the point of all this? You can't hear him, you can't feel him, you can't talk to him, you can't be obedient to him, you haven't got his power. That's why we get immersed. That portal within us will open and Yahushua comes and dwells with us. That's the connection. The Garden of Eden connection is within us. Until, of course, at the end when he just renews everything, both dimensions, and just brings us all into completion. So before we go into the personal behaviours of set apartness, I want to read this little thing to you here because it just blew my brains out. Bringing scripture into the whole idea of the portal archway. Yahushua has opened a portal for those who want access. For those who want access to his presence. He's opened a portal for those who want access to his presence and to learn the way of the words leading to peace and eternal life. The way of the words, Yahushua's way. He is the word. Every single one of these words that we're going through for the last few months now, nearly a year, it's all his word. It is him. You can't separate him from his word. You can't divide him up into Old and New Testaments in books and chapters and verses. No. It's all his word. And I'm listening these days, trying to glean the message and think to myself, what would he say today? Would he be walking around using the same ancient language? The message would be the same, but he wouldn't be talking the same way. Because many of the things here are agricultural and cultural and unfulfilled prophecies and shadows, which he's now fulfilled. So how does he want us to behave through all this new revelation of who he is? The fact that he is the Father. A lot of people won't even face that. He is the Father. We're not going to see two people when he comes back. One. Yahushua, the Father, became the Son. Anyway, Yahushua has opened a portal for those who want access to his presence and to learn the eternal way of the words leading to peace and eternal life. Just look at the Hebrew meaning of access. Let's look at this word access, because we have direct access into his throne room. It's a walking access, place to walk. Remember, we looked up the word walking, which meant the way. Yahushua is the way and the light of this world. He is what everyone is looking for. He is what everyone is looking for. He is the door of access. If we don't have access to the portal, we have no access to the Father. Access is through him. You cannot come to the Father except through the Son, because the Father is the Son. Makes sense? Through his blood, through his broken body, through his flesh being rent, the dimensional portal opened up. Through his blood there is connection. Remember, we dealt with that. The dimension from his the fire from his dimension, and the blood from our dimension. Well, Yahushua had to come into this dimension so that the blood would be from this dimension, but the fire was still from his presence, is still from that dimension. Do not quench that fire. Do not quench that spirit. Let's go to Ephesians 2. And it says, because through him, through Yahushua, we both have access to the Father by one Ruach. So then you are no longer strangers and foreigners. Strangers and foreigners are what they call the outside goyim, the nations. Strangers, foreigners, unclean. So we're no longer strangers or foreigners, but fellow citizens with the Kodesh, members of the household of Yahuwah. The household, a part of his family. Having been built upon the foundation of the emissaries and prophets, Yahushua Mashiach himself being chief cornerstone, in whom all the building, being joined together, grows into a set-apart temple. The Mishkan. You want to be part of the Mishkan? Mishkan? You can, man. You can, I can, everyone can. Mishkan. Temple in whom you are also being built together. We're all being built together. We might be scattered across the world, incognito, don't know who we all are, but we know we're part of the bride. We know we have a higher calling. We know there's much more to this life than just being immersed in reading the word. No, there's a higher calling. There's a prize, a crown to attain. A first resurrection and a bridal wedding feast to attain. So Yahushua was the chief cornerstone. He overcame all this. He was the first fruit. We follow him. He was the first fruit of many to follow. The first fruit of the harvest. And we are that harvest. So everything that he went through, we are going through. How are you faring compared to him? Unless we are willing to be in the way, in this behavior of Yahushua's words, through the given portal door, we have absolutely no hope of access to the Father. No hope of being the bride built into the Mishkan or a citizen of the household of Yahuwah. Access, a word revealing much more than we realize. Many people say no one has ever come back from the dead to tell us what is on the other side, but we have a portal that shows us and reveals to us our own personal access. Yahushua came back and told us, opened up the portal doorway. So can I ask you, all of you who love reading commentaries and love getting to your real serious Greek and Hebrew and all this study, if the people who are writing those commentaries have never been through the portal, have never understood the portal or had access to the throne room through his blood, through his only name of redemption, deliverance, Yahushua, not some weird, kooky, spooky other connotation of it. No, not JC, not any of that, not Yeshua, that's all rubbish. Yahushua, Ⅎ𝕗Mashiach. There's no deliverance in anyone else except his name. So if they haven't been through that, what are you reading? Oh, you can glean interesting thoughts and things. You can glean things from the worldly newspaper, reading that of a morning. But the point is, we put all this weight on these teachers, preachers, pastors, rabbis, and all that. Have they got this access within them? That's what you've got to look at. Yahushua came and he had this access. He had connection to the Father. He had connection to the higher dimension. He had this portal within him. And look how the religious people felt. So how are the religious people who are so, we've been doing this for 30 and 40 years and we are ordained, and whether we're ordained or not, or whether we're just messianics or natural, whether we're so much more superior in our knowledge. Oh, this revolution of knowledge. It's just people are drunk on knowledge, aren't they? Knowledge is nothing unless it's behaved in correct context, read and understood in correct context, and access. It's all about access. Any knowledge that does not give you access to Yahushua's throne room, what was it for? It's religious. So what does it say to us today who are walking in Yahushua's example? How are people going to feel about us? Remember, we dealt a couple of episodes about there are only two groups of people on the earth. Yisrael and the world, the nations, the pagan goyim. One is unclean and one is clean. So within that Yisrael, there will be two resurrections. There will be the wise and foolish maidens. So the world hates you. The world hates me. The world hates Yahushua. Unrepentant. So we're going to come into personal behaviours of set apartness today so that we can see if we want to walk through, have open access, direct access through the portal archway. It's open. We have the access. If you're not going in there, whose fault's that? He's done his part. He died to open the door, to join the dimensions. If you're not going in there and partaking, duh. So, let's go. Personal behaviour of set apartness. This is a really exciting section or chapter or section because everything in this has been called the Torah within the Torah. Because if you're reading a traditional scriptures, what chapter was it? It's chapter 19, Leviticus 19. Personal behaviour of set apartness. This section is considered the Torah within the Torah, as it incorporates most of the 10 words of the eternal blood covenant given to Moshe. So, Yahushua also said to Moshe, tell the people of Yisrael that they must be set apart because I, Yahuwah your Elohim, am set apart. Whenever you hear that word set apart, think of the clouds that I put behind me. Remember the clouds? Set apart, common and clean, common and unclean. Remember that when we say, when we're looking at the context here, set apart. Remember those clouds. You must be set apart as I am set apart if you want to dwell with me. Tell the people of Israel that they must be set apart because I, Yahuwah your Elohim, am set apart. Each of you must show great respect for your father and mother. Right after telling them you must be set apart as I am set apart, he's just tagging this little bit on the end. You must show great respect for, what's that got to do with being set? Obviously, it meant a lot. May not mean much to us today, but back in this culture, and to Yahushua, whose instructions live outside of time, because it's him, Yahushua feels that respecting your mother and father shows a great deal. I've seen a lot of disrespecting mother and father the last couple of days, having gone through the court system, and you can see the repercussions, the consequences of breaking any of these instructions. So you must show great respect for your father and mother. Why? Let's look in the turquoise here. Not just because they brought you into the world, but because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Love them. Let them have it. Don't take anything they do or say personally. If you've got parents who are unbelievers, nothing to do with Yahushua, let them have it. It doesn't say obey them in everything. It says show great respect. Honor them. When you're in their company, don't argue with them. You know, Paul said that about older men in general. Younger men, do not rebuke an older man. You know, but what's the word? Reason with him or plead with him or whatever the word is. As a father, come to him, address him as a father. You know, showing respect. So you must show great respect for your father and mother, not just because they brought you into the world, but because it's the right thing to do. Yahushua says it's the right thing to do. Love them, let them have it. What does let them have it mean? Let them have the fact that they are your parents, and when they talk to you, yeah, sure, Mum, that's a great idea. Yeah, sure, Dad, that's a great idea. Even if it's completely nuts compared to your beliefs in Yahushua, or if they don't understand anything, whatever, just understand and let them have it when you're in their company. You don't have to do it all when you leave their company. Have a good relationship with them, if you can, from your end. Don't take anything they do. Don't take anything they do or say personally. And you must always observe my Shabbat days of rest. Why? Because I'm Yahuwah, duh. You must always observe my Shabbat days of rest, for I am Yahuwah. Remember? Just as respecting our parents affects our physical relationships, resting on the Shabbat is an outward sign of how we feel about our relationship with our bridegroom, Yahushua. Did you see it like that? Is it the day we long for, and just because there's an extra, I mean, we can feel anointed every day, but if there's an extra anointing, an extra peace, a shalom on that day, special day, because remember, on that day, that's a set apart day. He set apart one day of his time and one little area, which is now us, of his creation, time and space. So in this creation, in this space, on that day, boom, there is an extra anointing. If you feel like it, if you want to, if you can, put yourself off and clear your schedule for one day a week. I know how important you all are, but as the creator of the universe, I figured you could bloody do what I say, if you want. So, do not put your trust in idols, or make metal images of any deity for yourselves. Why? Because I'm Yahuwah. I'm saying it like that because that meant a lot to them back then. Your name, your seal, the meaning of your name, it was all tied into the identity of the person who was talking. Kings and priests and the creative universe would speak, and just pagan deities were the same. If you knew the name of the pagan deity, you had power over it. So he's saying here, not to be compared with them, but he's saying, I am Yahuwah. That's all the power, that's all the reason you need. I'm Yahusha, so you damn well do it, if you want me. Yahusha, just talking about idols now. We know all about idols having come out of Egypt. Yahusha is passionately jealous and won't allow his bride to lift up anyone or anything above her feelings for him. We are now his set apart property. Big no-no. Can't mess around with his set apart property. He is passionately jealous. Won't allow his bride to lift up anyone or anything above her feelings for him. That is what an idol is in 21st century culture today. You want to put a statue of a Buddha on your mantelpiece? I mean, I think they look hideous, stupid little fat fella, like that. But if I was somewhere, I know people who won't even go into a restaurant and eat there because there's a Buddha in it. I'd go in there because of that. Because it has no power over me. It's a piece of wood or a piece of gold or silver. It's useless. If I believed in it and started bowing down to it, that would be another story. But it's stupid. The same could be said about a toilet seat. It's ridiculous. It's just matter. It's wood, clay, stone, sticks, bricks, it's rubbish, So that's what idol worship is today. It's not the physical objects that we might put around our house. Your behavior is how you worship idols. Because look here, Yahushua is passionately jealous and won't allow his bride to lift up anyone or anything. If you are lifting up anyone or anything in your heart, in your mind, in yourself, that you feel is more important than Yahushua, then you are into idolatry. Idolatry is a behavior. Got that? So, when you sacrifice an intimate peace offering to me, offer it properly, so you'll be accepted to me. The sacrifice must be eaten on the same day you offer it or on the next day. Whatever is left over until the third day must be completely burnt up. There's no refrigeration back then. You want to eat meat? We don't eat meat the next day if it's been left out. 3 days later? Whew, yuck. Whatever is left over until the third day must be completely burnt up. If any of the sacrifice is eaten on the third day, it will be contaminated, and I will not accept it. Anyone who eats it on the third day will be punished for defiling what is set apart to me and will be cut off from the community. Simple. We know that today just by basic hygiene. But remember, we're not supposed to be reading our modern hygiene and science into this. We just do it because he says to do it. But we understand, without refrigeration, you'd be pretty brave eating a piece of meat the next day, let alone 3 days later. So you'll be punished and cut off from the community, which meant, of course, physical and spiritual separation. Severed. Being cut off from the community was a big deal. In the turquoise here, so the intimate peace offering was everyone's favourite offering, not just because it was a voluntary gift, but because only a portion of the animal had to be burned, meaning the rest was taken home for dinner. With the other 4 offerings, most of the animals were either burnt or given to the priests to eat. So clearly people were getting in on this intimate peace offering, not out of love and worship, but out of greed, making the meat stretch over numerous days, and Yahushua wasn't having it. Because this was dedicated to him, this was set apart property. And you're making it stretch for 3 days until it's all, got maggots and flies blown and oof. As with Ananias and Sapphira in the early assembly, once you voluntarily give something to Yahushua, it legally becomes his own set-apart property. And if you go stuffing around with it, the end result will be death. Think about that today. What is the set-apart? How can we look around the world today and find some kind of comparison? Where's anything in this world that's set apart to Yahushua today? Shabbat? Nobody's interested in that. What can we visibly see today that has been set apart? That's his. We could say that's Yahushua's set apart property. The world is feral and disgusting, and like it's crumbling. What about us? Aren't we his set apart property? Aren't we the tabernacle? Isn't all the furniture within the tabernacle within us? Communication, the blood, the water, everything that's been done to the tabernacle was done to us so that we can have that portal archway, that connection into his dimension. Isn't that what that was all? So we get to the point, Mark, we are his set apart property. And you can't go stuffing around with his set apart property. If you've repented, if you've been washed in the blood, gone through the water and in immersion, and then you stuff around with this set apart property, the end result will be death. Or maybe you'll just wish you were dead, Consequences of actions. So there are big consequences if you go out into the world, or even if you don't go out into the world, but just think you can have your own way within this carcass. This is his set apart property. You can't do what you want with it. You don't own it anymore. You voluntarily gave it to him. Whether you understood what you were doing at the time or not, you understood enough to know that you needed deliverance. And you gave yourself voluntarily to him. You now belong to him. When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of the field, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. Same with your grape crops. Do not strip every last bunch of grapes from the vines, and do not pick up the grapes that fall to the ground. Leave them for the poor and the foreigners living among you. Why? For I am Yahuwah your Elohim. It shows you how he feels about the poor and the foreigners, doesn't it? While most of us aren't farmers, we still glean from the behavioural principles of generosity here. Helping someone within the body in need. And we're talking about desperate people here, not lazy people. Israel tolerated no laziness in their economy. So it wasn't just let's go and start a charity and give to everybody. No, that's, if you're called to do that, that's your business. But I'm talking about Israel did not tolerate laziness. So they didn't just give to anybody. Orphans and widows, you had to actually be legitimate. You had to be, it was real. You can't just be scamming the system. So helping someone within the body, within the bride in need. We're talking about desperate people here, not lazy people. So obviously you choose and discern carefully who you give to, because as we all know, people want to rip you off these days, just so they don't have to work. You don't work, you don't eat. That's Yahushua's words, not mine. See how all these things we're talking about are very much similar to the 10 Commandments, the marriage covenant. Don't steal, deceive, or cheat one another. We are not to deceive or engage in unfair dealings with other people. We are not to deceive or engage in unfair dealings with other people. Being sneaky, conniving, scamming, and ripping off is seen as wise and cunning in the world today. And while we don't have to be pushovers, nothing wrong with driving a hard bargain, we are to hold ourselves to a higher standard and make sure all our dealings with people are fair and above board, so that it's a win-win for both parties. If you're selling something or buying it, make sure it's a win-win. Make sure it's reasonable and honest. Do not bring shame on the name of Elohim by using it to swear falsely, for I am Yahuwah. How does that relate to us today? Using the name of Yahuwah, no one uses that name today except us, but how do we bring shame on his name? In this culture, making an oath automatically involved invoking the name or names of one deity or another. In fact, if you didn't invoke the name of a deity, it wasn't considered a legitimate oath. And we dealt with that, I think, last episode of the one before. It's like legal contracts today. We sign things, well, they did it with their words. I swear on the deity of the earth, or the deity of the sun, or the deity of or I swear on the name of Yahuwah. They'd use a deity to swear on, otherwise it wasn't a legal binding agreement or a vow or an oath. So, but what did Yahushua say? He told us not to make oaths at all. Yahushua told us not to make oaths at all, just to make our yes, yes, and our no, no, and leave it at that. Instead of making an oath and breaking it, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Just be honest. Do not defraud or rob your neighbour, and don't make your hired workers wait until the next day to receive their pay. Why? Wages were paid daily, so a man could get food for his family to eat that night. Not paying him meant his family went hungry that night, which is unfair and cruel. Fair, isn't it? Same goes to us today. If you're paying wages, that's the first thing you pay, because they're physical, real people in your business. They're at the top of the list. You pay them before you pay yourself, actually. You do not, that's only fair, that's ethical across the board. So many times we hear about people who have to pay millions and millions of dollars. There's a famous chef in Australia who's going bankrupt because he had to pay $8 million of back payments on his staff, and So, just common ethics and how to live. Do not insult the deaf or cause the blind to stumble. You must fear your Elohim, for I am Yahuwah. Do not insult the deaf or cause the blind to stumble. You must fear your Elohim, for I am Yahuwah. This is all behaviour. Saying kind words to a blind person while mockingly pulling faces at them, because they can't see you. So saying one thing begins, or smiling at a deaf person while saying horrible things to them under your breath, or smiling at a deaf person while saying horrible things to them that they can't hear, demonstrates the type of behaviour of unkindness that Yahushua hates. Yahushua hates unkindness. You can say words of discipline, you can raise your voice in anger, you can do behaviours, but what does Yahushua hate? Unkindness. Is there kindness in your house? Is there kindness in your words? Would you be considered a kind person? Do not twist justice in legal matters by favouring the poor or being partial to the rich and powerful. Always judge people fairly. Do not twist justice in legal matters by favouring the poor or being partial to the rich and powerful. Always judge people fairly. Some countries treat rich people's crimes less harshly than poor people's, while in many other countries the overall society is judged instead of the actual person who has committed the crime, arguing that if the criminal hadn't been in poverty, hadn't been illiterate, or come from a broken home, they wouldn't have committed the crime in the first place, as though this person has less personal responsibility to do what is right and be punished to a lesser degree, simply because they're poor. These excuses don't fly with Yahushua. Rich or poor are held to the same standard of behaviour. You don't get judged more harshly or highly because you're rich or poor. Do not make excuses. These excuses don't fly with Yahushua. Do not spread slanderous gossip among your people, and don't stand idly by when your neighbour's life is threatened, for I am Yahuwah. So don't spread slanderous gossip among your people, and don't stand idly by when your neighbour's life is threatened. Help. kindness, helping, you know. He's got to say it though, clearly it's not happening. Don't keep hatred in your heart for your brother. Brother in scripture refers to fellow Yisraelite. So don't keep hatred in your heart for your brother, but confront your neighbor. Your neighbor is all friends and acquaintances. Any person you're in contact with on a regular basis. That was interesting looking up those words. Your brother is anybody in Yisrael. Today, people who have been immersed in Yahusha and are on the path, they're our brothers and sisters. But your neighbor is all friends. Neighbor didn't mean the world though. Interesting. Neighbor did not mean the world. Neighbor means all your friends and acquaintances, any person who you're in contact with on a daily basis. So don't keep hatred in your heart for your brother, but confront your neighbor directly, so you will not be held guilty for their disobedience. This was a cultural mindset, a community mindset. If you know that your brother or your neighbor is doing something wrong, say something, help, do whatever you can. At least you've said it. Then you will not be held guilty for their disobedience. Don't seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Yisraelite either, but love your neighbor as yourself. Hang on. I thought this didn't come in until Yahusha said it. I thought he was the one who summarized all the instructions into love your neighbors, love one another, love, 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 love. Oh, look here. Right back here in boring old Leviticus, we've got love your neighbor as yourself. Interesting. Why? For I'm Yahuwah. So do it. This instruction has been spoken since the very beginning of time, not just when Yahusha walked the earth. Everything Yahusha said was to back up and fulfill the Torah. He brought no new teaching. He came to renew and breathe life into all the shadows. If you don't even know what the shadows are, how can you truly appreciate what he did and what he said? So you must obey all of my instructions. Don't mate two different kinds of animals. Don't plant your field with two different types of seed. And don't wear clothes woven from two different kinds of thread. You've heard, if you've been Jewish, if you've been brought up in the Jewish movement, you know about that. You can't wear clothes that have been sewn with two different mixing fabrics. Well, let's breathe some life into that too, eh? Order, it talks about order and chaos, mixing things. See how that fabric sentence is written right after, don't put two different kinds of animals together, don't put two different types of seed together in the field, don't put two different types of fabric together, all right? The Hebrew concept of improper mixing here also implies confusion as a result. Some versions actually say, don't confuse the matter by mixing. Who's the author of confusion? Think behaviors, guys. Ⅎ𝕬𝕗. It also implies confusion as a result. And we all know that Satan is the author of confusion. Yahusha is constantly dividing and separating in order to bring us peace with him. Dividing us and separating us. What is it he doesn't want us mixed with today? Idolatry, the world, the behaviors. He's always dividing us and separating us, and we are always trying to get back in there and intermix with the behaviors and cultures. So Yahusha is constantly dividing and separating in order to bring us peace with him, and those who love him can't mix those things set aside for life with those things destined for destruction. Can't mix those things set aside for life with those things destined for destruction. World. Nor are we to even mix two things, that while they may be good and acceptable of themselves, Yahusha, for his own good reasons, has deemed they should not be mixed. The set apart must not be mixed with the common things, nor should the clean be mixed with the unclean. The set apart must not be mixed with the common things, nor should the clean be mixed with the unclean. Unequally yoking ourselves as a set-apart and delivered bride to anything unclean of this world will bring about chaos and disharmony to our day. Yahusha is an Elohim of perfect order. routine and balance. So listening and following his voice will bring peace and joy to our day instead of drama, stress, and chaos. Everything he does is perfectly timed. Isn't that phenomenal? Breathing life into these shadows of mixing. So do you think this is all about not mixing different fabrics? Do you think Yahushua will be very wroth with us today if we wear a jumper that is a cotton polyester blend? You know, like, what do you think there might be some deeper meaning to this about the idea of mixing? Yeah? How does Yahushua feel about his word being mixed with lies? That's what we call a Bible today. Our behaviour being mixed with the world, with the nations. How did he feel about them worshipping the golden calf unto him, using his name, worshipping like the nations do? So how does he feel about us who are immersed in his name, washed in his blood, behaving like the wicked, unbelieving nations? What awaits us if we do that? A slap on the wrist? Or serious consequences? If a man has sex with a female servant whose freedom has never been ransomed or redeemed, but who is engaged to become another man's wife, there should be an investigation, and the man is legally required to pay the full agreed price that had been negotiated between the slave owner and the future husband, who's now decided to pull out of the deal because the slave girl is no longer a virgin. But neither of them are put to death because she was not free. Interesting. The man, however, must bring a ram as a forgiveness offering and present it to me at the entrance of the tabernacle, where the priest will purify him before me, and the man's disobedience will be forgiven. It was perfectly lawful for a father who was in financial hardship to sell his daughter to another man as a slave girl. Remember, wives and daughters and women in general were possessions of they were the treasured possessions, you know? So it was perfectly lawful for a man who was in financial hardship to sell his daughter to another man as a slave girl. This is not as a whore or a prostitute, this is selling his daughter to another man as a slave girl. And when the girl reached marrying age, her owner was obligated to either marry her himself, give her to his son for marriage, or allow her to be redeemed and sell her to another man for a redemption price. Does that make sense? When she gets old enough to be married, she should be married. So you either marry her yourself, offer her to your son who can marry her, or allow her to be redeemed, someone will pay you, and they can marry her. Because she's pure, she's a virgin. So, once an agreement was reached, the slave girl legally became the future wife of the man who had just redeemed her. So if another man comes and defiles her, she is no longer a virgin and unable to be sold to the future husband anymore. So the man responsible for defiling her was required to pay the slave girl's owner what he would have made now that the future husband had pulled out of the deal. Otherwise, the slave girl's owner was out of pocket. He bought this slave to serve him and then to sell her to a man to marry her. If you come along and defile her, no one wants to marry her now because she's not a virgin. So you need to pay up, cough up. Interesting. See, it wasn't about whether they should have sex or not, or this guy came along and slept with a woman. He wasn't dragged out and stoned, was he? See how back in our other episode we were talking about the women being possessions, and it was only adultery if the woman was caught breaking the marriage covenant. If the man broke the marriage, it wasn't about that. See, a man can have multiple wives, so the man wasn't breaking the marriage covenant. He would only be considered an adulterer if he broke someone else's, if he slept with another man's wife. But as far as breaking his own marriage, he couldn't, because he would just add more wives to his. Mad, isn't it? When you enter the land and plant fruit trees, leave the fruit unharvested for the first 3 years, consider it forbidden, and don't eat it. In the 4th year, the entire crop must be set apart to me as a celebration of praise. Finally, in the 5th year, you may eat the fruit. If you follow this pattern, your harvest will increase. If you follow this pattern, your harvest will increase. For I am 𝔂𝕙𝕒𝕙𝕒𝕚. Do you see people doing this today? When you plant your fruit trees, leave the fruit unharvested for 3 years. Don't harvest it for the first 3 years. Don't eat it. In the entire 4th year, the crop must be set apart to me as a celebration of praise. In the 5th year, you may eat the fruit. No trimming or pruning the trees. If the tree is not allowed to fully mature, it won't reach its full productive potential. And the crop from the 4th year was given to Yahusha as his set-apart property to feed the priests. Don't stuff around with your set-apart property. If you follow this pattern, your harvest will increase. Many people say to us, how can you close your shop? How can you close your salon on Saturday? It's the biggest day for most businesses. If you follow the patterns that Yahusha puts out, you will increase. You will be looked after, blessed. Shalom. Rest on the Shabbat day. 6 other days that money can flow in. You know? So, coming into some very interesting things now. Don't eat meat that has not been drained of its blood. Why would he say that? At a pagan rite of divination, where a ritual meal was eaten over a large pit filled with blood, so that the spirits of the dead could be conjured up from the blood. We've seen it in movies, but this is what they did. So he's not just saying we know he doesn't want us eating blood, but this is the real reason in this context here. It's all about abominable, adulterous, idolatry behavior. Don't eat the meat that has not been drained of its blood. Because look what they did with it. Eating meat over a large pit filled with blood, so the spirits of the dead could be conjured up from the blood. Don't practice fortune telling, divination, witchcraft or magic, sorcery, astrology, tarot cards. What's your star sign? Birthdays, Christmas, Easter, all these are all fortune telling, divination, witchcraft or magic. Throughout all their history, the Hebrews made abundant use of the occult because wanting to have supernatural power and know the future has always been something mankind is intensely drawn to. We want to know ahead of time what's going to happen instead of trusting Yahusha for all our needs. So while we're talking about eating meat that's been drained of blood, practicing fortune telling, divination and witchcraft, while we're still in this context of temple worship and what they did in the pagan rites of divination, let's keep going. Don't round the corners of your head or destroy the corners of your beard, or make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor put tattoo marks on you. Why? Because shaving the head, tearing or mutilating the beard, and gashing and piercing one's body were all pagan mourning practices that Yahusha didn't want his people to be a part of. We're still in this context of what they're doing at the pagan fertility rites and the divination and eating blood over vats, conjuring up evil spirits, fortune telling, divination, trances, witchcraft, magic, drugs. And in the middle of this he says, don't round the corner of your head, don't go pulling and gnashing bits out of your beard, and don't shave your flesh, don't put gashes or things in your flesh, don't tattoo marks on you, because I don't like you doing all this mixing with the pagan adultery. Can you see the context of this? I had to put a lot of thought into this because while I've never agreed with this whole wacky beard thing, I always believed that tattoos were evil. Why? Because it's in the same sentence. If you believe tattoos are evil, you must therefore believe that shaving your beard is evil, because it's in the same context, in the same sentence. And you must therefore agree that shaving your head is evil as well, because all three went hand in hand. Do not, besides, shaving the corners of your head were basically your sideburns anyway. They had all these weird, wacky things they'd shave, and bald patches in their head for mourning, and pulling pieces out of their beard and ripping things out and shaving, all this weird stuff they do. But you notice a few chapters ago when they were sick or when they had an infection, they were asked to shave every bit of hair off their body to be cleansed. part of the ritual cleansing. Make sure you're pure again. So it wasn't the act of shaving your head. It wasn't the act of shaving your beard. It wasn't the act of tattooing or putting marks on your body that was inherently evil. It was the reason or the context, which in this case is pagan mourning practices, pagan rites of divination, conjuring up spirits, practicing fortune telling, divination. Why else would you be talking about draining blood, fortune telling, divination, and then shaving beards in the same, practically the same sentence? I mean, let's not just, we're not allowed to shave our beard off, we're not allowed to ever have our haircuts properly, and we're not allowed to have tattoos, and we're not allowed to, drink blood, and we're not allowed to understand a few things here. There are things that are considered an abomination, and there are things that are cultural. Anything that is done in regards to a pagan festival and idolatry is an abomination. So yes, if you're going along to your local witches summit, or whatever they call them, and you are having your head shaved and you're in an orgy with 5 other women and they're shaving your head and they're doing this and they're putting tattoos on you, I'd say that whole behaviour as a whole would be considered evil. But see, we've always been taught things. You can't shave your beard off and you're not allowed to have tattoos, and do you think Yahushua really cares about what's going on the surface of this tabernacle? Do you think he is that worried, or do you think I'm going to come back to the same scripture about what nothing that goes into your mouth can defile you. Nothing that happens on this outward carcass can defile us. It's what comes out of our heart. The wickedness, the adulteries, the whorings, the idolatry, all the things that come out of the heart of man is what defiles him. Nothing we put in our mouth. Does that mean we can eat unclean animals? No, because unclean animals are not food, and you shouldn't be putting things that aren't food in your mouth. We teach the little babies that, don't we? Don't pick things up off the ground and eat them. That's not food. Well, unclean animals are not food either. So, no, we can't eat unclean animals. But nothing we put in our mouth, if you want to have the occasional cigarette, you want to, sugar. Sugar's bad for us too. How hard is it to cut sugar out of your life? Caffeine, coffee, all these things aren't good for us, but they don't make us ceremonially unclean. You got that? Tattoos do not make us ceremonially unclean. Having said that, I can't stand tattoos. I don't have any and never will have any. I don't like the permanency of the whole thing. Imagine putting a painting up in your house and someone saying, that's got to stay there forever. I don't like the whole idea of it. That's my personal taste. You can't read your personal taste and see tattoos are evil. You're evil because you've got tattoos. No. The pagan rites of divination were evil, and that's the context we're talking about here. All the behaviours that were involved in the pagan rituals of divination and the pagan rites and the pagan mourning festivals, basically all the pagan stuff. So it's about the behaviour. However, if you have been washed in the blood of Yahushua and you are going for the first resurrection to be in the marriage festival, I would question your reason for then wanting to go out and get a tattoo, because it's centering on yourself and your flesh to start with, and two, they're bloody expensive. Your money could be well spent. Your money could be better spent somewhere else, in your family, or somewhere better. It's a waste of money, and it's all to do with the self, aggrandizing and worship of the self. So in that sense, yes, it is self-centering, and it's not good. I don't think it pleases Yahushua, but I'm looking at the context here, where we've always been bombarded to us, tattoos are evil, and yet people shave their beards. Well, they both go hand in hand. If you want to believe that all this is still for the 21st century, you have to wear a long beard, you can never shave it. You have to, all grow your hair out because you can't, and you can't, have tattoos, and that's fine, that's you. But I'm looking at this from the 21st century through the context of behaviour, and behaviour is what makes us unclean. Remember, we're looking now at a time where they were in fear of jumping from the set apart cloud into the unclean, not being allowed in the presence of Yahushua. We don't have that fear today. We cannot do anything that makes us unceremonially clean. We cannot do anything to close the portal archway, because he's opened that once and for all. Certain behaviours will keep us out of his presence though. I don't think these are one of them though. I certainly, if you have tattoos and you come to Yahusha, I certainly think it's an irrelevant point. It's like Paul saying to the Gentiles, you don't have to be circumcised in your flesh. That's been and gone. That's been transformed. That's been, Yahusha's fulfilled that. The circumcision is now of your heart. Whatever is on your flesh, is irrelevant. Whatever piercings or tattoos or beards or no beards, or it's not about the external appearances. What coloured socks you are wearing, whether you are wearing socks with shoes or sandals, or whether you are wearing a jacket or a coat, or what colour you're wearing, that's things of 21st century fashion. It has nothing to do with becoming clean or unclean, because the only thing that can make us unclean is our behaviour. Not ceremonially unclean, but cuts us off from his presence. It stops us from going in through the portal if we have wicked behaviours. So read all this through behaviour, guys. I found that fascinating. I had to decide inside myself whether I thought that just because I hate tattoos, that's not a reason to then say it's illegal. No, I had to read that and go, well, I don't have a beard most of the time. I do right now, but I don't have a beard. And I don't believe you have to have a beard. So therefore I must believe, because it's in the same sentence, that tattoos are permitted. Does that make sense? I tossed and turned on that for a while. And it's true. It is true. Unless you're doing all these things unto pagan idols, in which case it's a behaviour. In which case, eating chicken, eating turkey is not illegal. But if you take it to a pagan Christmas festival and eat it, that's illegal too. Do you know what I'm saying? It's about what's going on in the, I love cake. I love cake. Any chance I get to eat cake, but I wouldn't go to a pagan birthday festival and eat a birthday cake with the candles flaming to the Queen of Heaven. Cake for the Queen of Heaven, Do you know what I'm saying? Read it in context, guys. I think we've dwelt on that enough. Do not defile your daughter by making her a prostitute. Fair enough. Or the land will be filled with prostitution and wickedness. A father was not to have his daughter participate in a religious ceremony that involved sex acts. Nor was he to sell his daughter for common or general prostitution in order to get money to buy a sacrificial animal to sacrifice at the tabernacle. The warning being given here is that if Israel begins to drift into ceremonial religious prostitution, then the whole promised land will become defiled and will fall into depravity. Another indication of just how organically intertwined the people and the land of Israel are. People and the land intertwined. The wickedness of the people is also on the land. We did studies about that years ago. You could see in nations that worship idols, and look at the third world countries, they all worship idols. Look at their land. Crops don't grow. It's like some draw a radius around it and there's a death, because the obedience or disobedience of the people is directly related to the land. Interesting. You want to be blessed? Follow these patterns. Rest your land every 7th year. When you first plant your crops every 3 years. See what we just read? Nobody cares about this. Keep my Shabbat days of rest and show reverence towards my sanctuary. For I am Yahusha, the sanctuary, the space, the Shabbat, the time. Keep my Shabbat day of rest, set apart time, and show reverence towards my sanctuary, set apart place. For I am Yahuwah. Instead of offering religious sex as the heathens do to honour me, follow my actual instructions and rest on the Shabbat day. Because the heathens were offering religious sex as offerings. That's how they would offer to their deities, religious sex, orgies, anal sex. Remember, we dealt with that. That was the main common behaviour, abominable behaviour at the pagan temples. He wasn't addressing homosexual, lesbian relationships. He wasn't addressing the relationships because people wouldn't admit to it back then anyway. He wasn't addressing any relationships. He was just dealing with the act of sodomy. He was just dealing with the simple act of anal sex between men or women. It's disobedience, it's abomination, it's wicked. So don't do it. Don't defile yourselves by turning to mediums or to those who consult the spirits of the dead, for I am Yahuwah your Elohim. Don't defile yourselves by turning to mediums. Even back here in primitive Leviticus, there were mediums, people listening to spirits and occultists and spirits of the dead, for I am Yahuwah. Yahusha is protecting us from coming into contact with a demon who is pretending to be the spirit of a deceased person. People say that to me. They say, I went to a medium once and talked to my dead relative and this and that, and everything they said happened, or everything they said true, and I understood them, and they knew everything about my life and all these things. Well, yeah, it must be true. It is true. But you're not talking to your dead relative. They're in the ground or in an ash box. They're dead. They're waiting the great white throne judgment. You are talking to a demon who is impersonating your dead relative. And they know everything. They know all about your life and the dead relative's life, and they're impersonating. So Yahushua is protecting us from coming into contact with a demon who is pretending to be the spirit of a deceased person. Because dead people are gone. Their physical body is destroyed and their inner essence of the spirit is asleep, waiting to be awoken at the great white throne judgment, or the first resurrection if they are Yahushua's bride. So we are not to communicate with unclean fallen spirits of the enemy. That's the whole point here. Don't communicate with even the ones in your own head. Don't ignore them. And we stumble all the time. We get deceived. We listen to things and we have to repent and come before you. But we're training ourselves not to listen to them. Check your thoughts before you believe them. It's impossible to never hear them, but do you believe it? Because they don't just tell you insanely deceptive things. They take the truth of what's happening in front of your eyes and they taint it with a negative spin, so that you'll believe it. They're very cunning. And they appear to you as pretty, alluring things in the world, shiny, sparkly, sensual, sexual, anything to try and draw our attention off Yahushua. Because when we've got our eyes on Yahushua and we've got our eyes on the prize, we're going through this portal. We want to be connected through the portal archway. And Satan hates that because he used to be connected. And his connection was severed and he was banished down to this dimension. So, stand up in the presence of the elderly and show respect for the aged, and you shall be favoured by them. Fear your Elohim, for I am Yahuwah. Making sure an older person's needs are met as they gradually become physically frail and possibly unable to care for themselves. It also means that we should respect and appreciate the wisdom they have gained through many years of living. And I'll touch briefly on this concept today that's come up, called ageism. Older people finding it hard to find employment, discrimination and prejudice being shown to older people, unfair prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of a person's age. Do you look down your nose at older people? It always comes up when there's jokes all over the internet about it, and younger people have a big laugh about it, trying to teach an older person about the computer, and comedians tell jokes about it, and this and that and this and that. How does the older person feel after they've had to teach you how to walk, teach you how to talk, teach you how to feed yourself, teach you how to clothe yourself, provide all the things to do such, and then go through all the things in life with you that you can't grasp, and even when they've told you to do it, you don't do it, and you fall on your face multiple times, and you want to have a go at them because they don't understand some newfangled device? Does that sound fair? That's ageist. You're an ageist. So, usually doesn't like ageism. It's on the grounds of a person's age too. Older people could do it to young people too. It's not an old people thing. It's an age thing. Looking down on people because they're young. Usually doesn't like that either. Lift them up, encourage them. Don't make them feel like nothing. Bring them into your understanding, your wisdom, Don't take advantage of foreigners who live among you in your land, but instead treat them like native-born Israelites. And love them as you love yourself. Love them as you love yourself. Remember that you were once foreigners living in the land of Egypt. Foreigners are to be treated fairly, and even those who wish to give up their pagan deities in exchange for real, living Elohim of Israel are to be welcomed with open arms. This of course foreshadowed that time when Yahushua would come and offer foreigners the opportunity to be grafted into Israel through belief in him. And don't use dishonest standards when measuring length, weight, or volume. Your scales and weights must be accurate. Your containers for measuring dry materials or liquids must be accurate, for I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Do not cheat each other or foreigners in your business practices. Don't cheat people, don't rip people off. You must be careful to keep all my instructions by putting them into practice. I am Yahuwah. How do you put Yahushua's instructions into practice? How do you practice them? You think them, you believe them, you put them in the internal computer of your heart, and you go, I believe that, so next time something comes up, I'm going to behave this particular way. If you put all the scriptures into your heart and believe them, and they're written on your heart, the behaviors that come out of your heart when people talk to you are going to be behaviors, because everyone out there is mad, are going to be ones of rising up and rebuking, or humbling and letting them have who they are. Because you know you can't change anybody's mind anyway. Letting them have who they are, because if it's wrong, you sure will bash them around. Definitely don't take anything they say personally, because then you'll have that poison in you too. And definitely don't make excuses for yourself and lie. So the next few pages, what were a few pages, were just a summary kind of what the person was cut off for and what a person was killed for, executed for. So I've just put this into a big summary to save us about 5 or 6 pages. So I'll just breeze through that now. Behaviours given the death penalty. These were the behaviours, the summary of the behaviours that were given the death penalty. If you did child sacrifice, you're executed. Communicating with spirits, executed. This was all abominable stuff. Yahushua hates it. Spiritual whoring, dishonouring your dad and mum. You were executed for that. A man having sex with a married woman who was not his wife. So this was the only situation where he would be considered an adulterer and executed. All other, and not because he did it, but because he did it with a married woman. If he did it with a single woman, or even a woman under a father's home, he would have to pay the bride price and marry her, because sex is marriage. But if you have sex with another man's wife, she's already married, so that's adultery, and you'd be executed. If you're sowing your seed in another man's wife, you've brought on a whole lot of other complications. So having sex with a married woman who was not his wife, having sex with his father's wife, his son's wife, another man, an animal, or marrying both a woman and her mother at the same time. Those were all behaviours that you were given the death penalty for. Those things today are either legal or trying to be made legal. That's how accepted they are today. It's just, people having sex all the time with all different people hating their parents, and divorcing themselves from their parents, emancipating, all sorts of things. Sleeping with father's wife, son's wife, another man, gays, LBGT, and all that stuff. An animal, people trying to marry their animals today too, or marrying both a woman and her mother at the same time. Orgies running rampant, no one cares. People were executed. It would have to be pretty abominable behaviour for you to execute you, wouldn't it? And these were the behaviours where you would just be cut off. Behaviours causing people to be cut off. So these were the behaviours causing people to be cut off. You weren't executed, but you were cut off from the camp. It might have meant death, but it meant spiritual death as well. Being cut off with both physical and spiritual excommunication. So ignoring child sacrifice. If you knew about a child sacrifice going on and you ignored it, you'd be cut off. A man marrying his natural sister, a man having sex with a woman while she's on her menstrual cycle, a man having sex with his natural aunt or aunt by marriage, a man having sex with his brother's wife. You weren't executed, but you were cut off. So I just thought it would save some time there instead of going through 5 or 6 pages of you will be cut off and you'll be executed, you'll be cut off, and it's just there, it's all there. It's pretty serious to do these behaviours, isn't it? So remember, we're not reading these to be afraid of being cut off from Yahushua if we are the bride. We're reading these to go, these are the behaviours Yahushua hates, and he doesn't change. He is the living word. He always hated these things. So even though you may not be executed for something, it's in the negative column. He hates it. Disrespecting your parents, having sex with a woman on a cycle, having sex with a man, all these different behaviours, eating unclean animals, all these things that he considers an abomination, we don't do. So does that mean I'm just making an excuse because I want to be able to shave my beard off and I want to go and get tattoos? I wouldn't get tattoos now anyway. I've got 8 children, it's a waste of money, and I don't love myself that much anymore. I might love myself a little bit, that's got to die, but tattoos, not on the table for me. But as far as legality, today in the 21st century, stop looking down on people who are choosing to get tattoos. It's no different than someone who goes to smoke weed, buys cigarettes, buys sugary foods, buys this, buys that. It's all a waste of money. It's all a waste of money. Alcohol costs a lot of money too. Beer costs a lot of money. Coffee, all the things that we find as creature comforts cost money. So if somebody's got lots of money and they're in the bride and they want to decorate their body with tattoos, that's their business. It's not, if they're not doing it unto a pagan deity, pulling their beard out and shaving bits like the monks do, shaving bits. You see what I'm saying? All the behaviours are the same. Behaviours are what make us unclean. Behaviours are what keeps us out of Yahushua's presence. The portal's open, but we don't go in there because we're too busy focusing on ourselves and the world and the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life. But the stargate's open, the portal's open. We're too busy looking in the mirror at ourselves and, look at you. Look. Set apart or distinguished from another. You must make a distinction between clean and unclean animals, between clean and unclean birds, not defiling yourself by eating any unclean animal or bird or creature that scurries along the ground. I have identified them as being unclean for you. I have identified them as being unclean for you. For what reason? None of our business. He said it, we do it. You must be set apart because I, Yahuwah, am set apart, and I have set you apart from all other people to be my very own treasured possessions, my own personal property. So you are to be set apart because I am set apart. If you are no longer set apart, then you can't be with me because I'm not going to defile my set apartness. Nothing. I'm the creator of the universe. The exact same Hebrew word is being used to indicate the separation of Israel from the world and for the separation of clean animals from unclean animals. So the exact same Hebrew word is being used to indicate the separation of Israel from the world and for the separation of clean and unclean animals, to set apart or distinguish from another. Are you catching the true meaning and significance of this? In the same way that Yahushua makes a distinction between Israel and all the other nations of the world, is the same way we are to make a distinction between clean and unclean things in our life. And remember that Israel possessed no special merit of their own for Yahushua to declare them clean, as opposed to everyone else in the nations being declared unclean. The same goes for the issue of clean and unclean animals. No animal of its own merit deserved to be declared clean, and the opposite is also true. Chosen and unchosen, and clean and unclean, were all based on Yahushua's sovereign decisions, which he made for his own good reason. So it's our main purpose as priests, Yahushua's bride, to separate what is clean and unclean in our lives. What behaviours are clean, what behaviours are unclean. Do you understand that? So it's really important, if this is our job, to make sure we don't get defiled and staying, and we can't go boldly into his presence if we're bound up with all these things. Even though the portal's open, we don't go in because we're bound up, too busy doing what we want to do, doing things that are unclean. We need to separate what is clean and unclean and only do the clean and overcome all the unclean. Understand that? While the issue of not eating unclean animals has nothing to do with pagan worship, it's an instruction for all time and must be obeyed to this day, hair, beards, tattoos are directly related to idol worship here in Leviticus. Here in Leviticus, they are. Hair, beards and tattoos are directly related to idol worship here in Leviticus, which is the key behaviour that Yahusha hates. Not just the rigid lifestyle of never cutting the hair, never cutting your beard or having tattoos or earrings. Those things, you could have all those things and be completely disobedient or obedient. You could have all those, you could never cut your hair, never cut your beard, never have tattoos or never have earrings and still be in a completely abominable lifestyle. You could be going along to a Christmas festival, you could be in a homosexual relationship, you could be, you know what, but you don't have any of those things. Do you know what I'm saying? It's behaviour that Yahusha's looking at, not your outward appearances. I think I've dwelt enough on that subject now. Not because I want to have tattoos or earrings or anything, but I'm just looking at the context. It's important to look at the context. Yahusha says in other places men should not be dressed in women's clothing, or men should not be behaving in effeminate ways, you know, being overly feminine, or, you know, men shouldn't be wearing all this jewelry and garb and things that women wear anyway. So like, be a man, take all that rubbish off, you don't need it. I find it, if I saw an old man with earrings, I'd find it very hard to take him seriously, you know, because it's kind of immature, it's a feminine thing, wearing earrings and, you know. Same could be said for lots of tattoos as well, I guess. It's the worship of self, which Yahusha does hate and we are supposed to overcome. So in that context, I don't agree with tattoos, waste of money, centering on yourself. But in the context here in Leviticus, it's about pagan worship. In the 21st century, should Yahusha's bride have long hair and a beard and no tattoos or earrings? Even if it's a customary practice that has nothing to do with paganism. Is this the takeaway here, or should we be set apart in our behaviour? So I'll leave all that for you to decide, but I just wanted to look at the context written in Leviticus, because that's the scripture they always throw up. It's so important context, isn't it? So I thoroughly enjoyed that chapter about the Torah within the Torah. We learn, it's like a summarising and going over it again for us, and adding more behaviours to the mix. Yahusha's showing us what he loves and what he hates. Don't do that, it's abominable. Don't do anything that's involved with a pagan ceremony, or a fertility rite, or mourning or worshipping the dead, feeling it and going and visiting the grave and putting flowers there every week and craving it and cutting yourself and putting memory tattoos of the people on it. And see what I'm saying? I'll leave it at that, guys. I think you can discern. I hope I haven't confused the issue too much. These are my thoughts on it, listening to Yahusha, gleaning from the 21st century behaviour. It's all about behaviour. Read Leviticus. This is why Leviticus is so exciting. Reading it fresh with Yahusha's Ruach as the interpreter. Not other people. I'm reading a lot of other people's stuff, but most of them just going, that's wacko. You know, they obviously don't have the Ruach. Doesn't mean that at all. You know, people are basing their whole lifestyle around stuff and restricting themselves in ways that is out of context, you know. However, Paul did say just because all things are permitted doesn't mean all things are good for us. All right? See you later.